If I asked you, who is Ash Ketchum? You'd probably respond with something like, Ash Ketchum is the hero of the Pokemon anime. Or, he's that dude who runs at dangerous things like an idiot. Or perhaps you might even say Ash Ketchum is a goal-driven, high-achieving Pokemon trainer and a loyal friend who lifts his companions and his Pokemon up so that they can reach their dreams. All of these statements would be correct. But why? Who exactly is the Ash Ketchum that we think we all know? How did factors in his childhood sculpt a kid who was destined for greatness way back when we met him on April 1st, 1997? What is Ash Ketchum's backstory? Before we crack open the mysteries of Ash's past, which is going to be very interesting, let's take a Charu minute, which is usually about 3 minutes in normal person time, to answer the question, who is the Ash Ketchum that we know today? I mean, of course, he is the protagonist of the long-running Pokemon anime who's been journeying across the Pokemon world, collecting gym badges, competing in Pokemon leagues, falling for Team Rocket disguises, and jumping 50 feet into the air to dunk on people for years now. But achievements and rather unusual antics aside, who exactly is Ash Ketchum as a character? What is the essence of his personality? Well, if I were to distill his entire character into just 2 words, I'd say that, first of all, Ash Ketchum is determined. That is to say that he is a goal-driven 10-year-old boy or 40-year-old man or centuries-old warlock, or, well, his age is a whole other issue, but the point is that Ash is a character who is unwavering in both his determination to succeed as well as his determination to uphold his beliefs about the world. And we see this ongoing push to better himself and to ascend to new heights, even in the wake of very crushing failures. And we see how he will go to unbelievable lengths to stick up for what he thinks is right. Even if that means running at dangerous things, or becoming a furry, or dancing around in his underwear like an unhinged madman. And let's not forget, he also works pretty hard to win league championships and stuff like that as well. If his determination comes packaged with any character flaws, it's that he can be very, very stubborn. And his competitive spirit is linked to a sense of pride that has caused him to easily become quite overconfident in his abilities at times, while succumbing to his own insecurities when things don't quite go according to plan. For instance, in the Saito slapdown of 2020. But what the Hoppips happened in Ash's childhood that amped his determination up to such Gohanic levels? We're going to investigate it all in just a moment, but since our Charu minute isn't quite up yet, let's briefly outline the second defining characteristic of Ash's personality, that in addition to being as determined to win as Brock is determined to land the big one, Ash Ketchum is very, very caring. That is to say that he is both a protector who shields his friends from harm, as well as a nurturing figure who facilitates their growth and development. This desire to take care of others is reflected in the way he interacts with his friends, as well as in his very own Pokemon training philosophies. He supports his friends and their dreams no matter how big or crazy those dreams seem to be, and instead of forcing his Pokemon along his own predetermined development tracks, he instead establishes a supportive environment in which he coaxes the best out of them, letting them find their own way to excel. Just like a community soccer league coach who even gives the pants-crapping grass pickers a chance to shine alongside the stars, knowing that maybe they might become great one day if they are just given a chance. So both determined and caring, Ash has the qualities of a leader, and aside from his tendencies to chop wood at people's heads and insult women rather needlessly, he is a true role model for viewers young and old. And now that we have defined the essence of the character of Ash Ketchum in the anime, it is time to wind back the clock and break down the factors at play in Ash's childhood that brought him to where he is today. Let's start by taking a look at where Ash's determination comes from, and then tackling the emergence of his caring side. From the in-anime material that is available, we can see two factors that shaped Ash's determination and his competitiveness in his early years. Number one, his good-for-nothing father and grandfather, and number two, a lopsided rivalry with the village Chad. Firstly, about Ash's dad. As you may know, Ash's dad has been absent for the duration of the Pokémon anime and is barely even mentioned by anyone in the cast. Yes, Ash himself recently talked about his dad in Pokémon Coco, but the Ash of that movie is considered to be an alternate universe Ash, so we will leave that chitter chatter out of this conversation. In the main anime series itself, Ash's dad's existence is noted only briefly by Ash's mom Delia when he calls her after arriving in Viridian City. Ash, being the off-kilter wild man that he is, got to Viridian City in just one day, whereas apparently it took his dad 4 entire days to get there. And while the English dub didn't even translate this next important point, in the original Japanese script, Delia comforts a down in the dumps Ash by saying, "こうなったら全身あるのみ。パパとグランパを超えるポケモントレーナーに絶対なるのよ。頑張ってね." Yes, that is my best Ash's mom voice. I apologize for my sins. So, point number one, we can regard Ash's dad as a failed father figure for leaving home to never return, but also, point number two, the way Delia snappily delivers this line is as if she thinks that those dudes were absolute dongers. And so we are left with another question. Were Ash's dad and grandfather not only failures as parents, but also as Pokemon trainers? And if so, does Ash feel as if it is on his shoulders to break this lineage of failure, not ending up like his loser dad, restoring a family name crumpled by generations of deadweights farting around in the boonies, becoming successful enough to set his mom up for retirement before Sugar Daddy Oak bites the dust? Those sound like some very simple but also very powerful sources of determination to me. In fact, in Pocket Monsters the Animation, an official anime companion novel written by the show's original chief writer Takeshi Shudo and published by Shogakukan in 2 volumes from 1977 to 1998, the Ketchum legacy of failure is actually explicitly portrayed as a very powerful source of encouragement for Ash. And before embarking on his own Pokemon adventure, he assures his mom, "I will not end up like them." As we know, those sparks of disappointment, perhaps even resentment, they ultimately do catch fire, and Ash sets the Ketchum failure streak ablaze in a new era of glory by racking up some very big victories across multiple regions. All because he was just so determined to prove himself and so competitive all along the way. So while research in the field of child psychology indicates that while growing up fatherless generally has a negative impact on the development of young boys, leading to insecurities, inferiority complexes, and a tendency towards macho posturing, which may explain some of Ash's flaws that we mentioned earlier. At the same time, such a fatherless upbringing, generally speaking, also makes young boys display exposed to compete very, very intensely with others, which, as I'm sure you know, is one of Ash's key characteristics and something that has actually benefited him immensely. Moreover, although Ash's determination and glass pride may be rooted in the whole Pokemon dads suck syndrome, they were absolutely amplified by his turbulent relationship with Gary Oak. As you may recall, Gary trolled Ash over and over again in the original series by keeping 10 steps ahead of him at all times, slamming doors in his face, making off with all the girls, and sneering at him at every turn until Ash finally took him down in their Johto League Silver Conference Top 16 match, the 270th episode of the Pokemon anime. And both episode 269 and 270 establish additional depth to Ash's backstory. Ties that bind the first episode of a two-part banger showcasing Ash and Gary's Silver Conference battle gave us insight into the early days of their rivalry when Ash recounted a very important memory to Brock and Misty. As the story goes, before Ash and Gary even received their very first Pokemon, the two rivals were fishing at a stream in Pallet Town, Gary taking dumps all over Ash as always, when they both hooked something, initiating a tug-of-war to reel in what ultimately turned out to be nothing more than a rusty Pokeball, which snapped into two pieces during this fishing battle. And apparently Ash actually held onto his half of the Pokeball ever since, taking it with him on his adventures through Kanto, the Orange Islands, and even Johto as a token of their rivalry, and a good luck charm of sorts. Evidently, the rivalry with Gary meant a lot to him and was something that continuously drove him to better himself. And while they rarely battled, Gary dunked on Ash in other ways every single time they encountered one another, bringing more money, more girls, more badges, more Pokemon, more battle prowess, and more Chad indicators to the table than Ash could even dream of bringing. As such, it was only natural for the underdog to swell up with pride whenever he took a few points for himself from time to time back then. So although Ash in recent times is cocky on account of simply being an idiot, his cockiness in the early days appears to be the manifestation of a fairly serious inferiority complex. And while the lack of direct encounters and battles with Gary have obscured Gary's importance in Ash's character development relative to later rivalry plotlines that were wonderful and painted out in glitter ink for fans, Gary was no doubt a figure who inspired Ash as much as he derided him. And this all made that victory over Gary in the Silver Conference so much sweeter. Sweeter than a Slurpuff sundae. And, well, the rivalry actually meant something to Gary too, as it turned out that he had been carrying the other half of the Pokeball all along. With all of this talk of crappy dads and bad chads driving Ash up the wall and making him determined to prove himself, you may be wondering, where exactly does the caring side of Ash's personality come from? Why is he such a great supporter to both his human friends and to his Pokemon friends? I mean, this is the kind of guy who helps traumatized girls overcome their trauma and turn into badasses, who takes abandoned monkeys into his care and teaches them to go Super Saiyan, who even cleans Garbodor buttholes with Q-tips. That is to say that Ash isn't just a nice guy, but he is a guy who actively tries to lift everyone around him up a notch or two or three. And he's been like this ever since he embarked on his journey with Pikachu and stepped up to take care of and selflessly protect a Pokemon who didn't even like him at the time. But let's go way back to before he even met Pikachu, and take a look at a couple key events of his early years. Firstly, in Pokemon XY, we had the flashback to a summer camp in Kanto where he found a young girl injured in the woods, bandaged her up, gave her words of encouragement that would literally change the course of her life and led her to safety. Because, as you know, Poliwags are very scary. Of course, I am talking about Serena, a character who he helped to grow not just within the scope of the Pokemon XY and XY and Z series, but for many years before he even became a Pokemon trainer. As we can see, his eagerness to protect and help others isn't something that he simply developed over the course of his journeys as a trainer, but something that was already very much a part of him way back then. And we can go back even further to a flashback that was presented in Seeing the Forest for the Trees, which not only gives us another good example of Ash's childhood desire to take care of others, but actually shows us why he became a Pokemon trainer in the first place. We were treated to this revealing flashback after Ash took a crushing L at Snowbell Gym, and while moping about in the woods outside of town, he took refuge from a snowstorm in a cave with some wild Pokemon. And in addition to providing longtime viewers with some tasty nostalgia, it also caused Ash to recall a time when he sheltered some other very frightened wild Pokemon from a rainstorm years ago. Given his trend of getting trapped in storms, I do hope this man is honing his bushcraft skills or intends to teach one of his Pokemon Sunny Day at the very least. Anyways, he later explains this experience to Greninja, reaffirming that his caring nature is a characteristic that emerged in his early childhood, and even going so far as to say that this experience is what originally inspired him to become a Pokemon trainer to begin with. And that is very interesting information indeed. And when you consider this source of inspiration, everything about Ash's approach to interacting with and training Pokemon starts to make sense. His role as a nurturer and protector that clashed so severely with that of Paul, the relentless driver and punisher of Diamond and Pearl fame, and the training methodology and approach to life that has defined his past 2 decades of friendship and adventures with Pokemon. All the ingredients were already there in his early childhood. So as far as Ash's portrayal in the anime goes, everything seems to link back to that defining childhood experience. Or does it actually run a little bit further? The disposition to be a protector and a nurturer, to shield these wild Pokemon from the storm. Given his readiness to protect these creatures, one has to assume that Ash's caring personality was actually shaped prior to these events. And while we have went back as far into Ash's anime history as we can, there is one thread remaining that brings us a full 360 back to where we started, to Ash's home life, and more specifically to his relationship with Delia Ketchum. And that is not a bad place to end up. Without a doubt, whereas Ash's dad deserted him, Delia has always stood strong as this unshakable pillar of Ash's life, raising him all alone, encouraging him to shoot for the stars, checking in with him on his travels, giving him advice, occasionally joining in on his adventures, and giving him a place to return home to whenever he wishes. Any time that Delia has entered the anime, she has done so as this figure of maternity, stability, and comfort, even as recent as in episode 30 of Pokemon Journeys, wherein she slept over at the Cerise laboratory to comfort a troubled Pikachu, singing him to sleep, and had everyone over for dinner back in Pallet Town the next day. Just as Ash nurtures his Pokemon but gives them the freedom they need to grow, Delia has always taken care of Ash while letting him pursue a career that many other parents may frown upon. Like all the best mums, she has been a caring and protective figure while at the same time letting her kid just get out there and challenge the world. I personally think that perhaps, again because of being brought up without a paternal figure in his life, Ash ended up attaining a great deal of his mother's maternal tendencies, more so than he may have otherwise attained if his dad had been at home. And with a wonderful mom like Delia, is it even a surprise that Ash turned out to be such a kind, caring, and supportive guy? When it comes down to it, when we consider what kind of person Ash is now, and when we explore all of the key snippets of his childhood that are presented in the anime, we can clearly see that everything about his character comes full circle back to the Ketchum household. A household with an absentee father, a 5-star mother, a household wherein Ash's determination and caring spirit sprung into being. And as tumultuous as his early years may have been, we can certainly say thank you to the Ketchums, or at the very least Delia, for presenting us with this somewhat stupid but on the whole very wonderful Pokemon hero. But I'm curious what you think. Are there other experiences that contributed deeply to Ash's determination and caring personality? What is your favorite Delia Ketchum moment? And is Ash's dad still out there somewhere on his way to pick up a jug of milk? Well, I hope you enjoyed this one, and as always, let's chat.
What?